In Overlord is Velzard. By ISLEM23XDL. Chapter 14. In a swamp some distance from the city of Arental, what was once a water-filled marshland was transformed into an ice sheet. The water froze to form solid ground, and several columns rose meters from the ground. If you looked closely, you would notice human-like shapes crouching within them. The ice was decorated with scattered limbs, heads, arms, and legs. The cold was so bitter that the air froze, making it unfit for breathing. Even the blood itself formed solid shapes. Standing over a group of lizardmen, Velzard unsheathed her sword, which was attached to the head of a lizardman, and squirted blood from the blade. She looked up at the massacre she had committed, hundreds of meters covered in a thick layer of ice and snow. Dozens of realistic ice statues were either trying to escape or fighting for their lives, although that was in the past. Admiring her work, she jumped out of the hole she was in and headed towards the leader's tent. Now, there should be no one left but the leader. Although most of the tents were destroyed or frozen by her, there were 2 tents that remained as they were, or at least they were not seriously damaged. The 2 tents were next to each other, separated only by a small river, which had also frozen over. The first tent was the provisions tent, where they kept food, weapons, etc. The second was the chief's tent, where the chief of the tribe lived and where the elders met to make decisions and discuss the situation. Velzard didn't forget that her purpose in coming here was in the first tent, but she decided to deal with the rest first. With steady steps and her sword slung over her shoulder, she advanced to the second tent, directly where the chief lay. Inside the tent, an old lizard man dressed as a shaman and holding a wooden staff was shivering in the corner. Whether he was shivering from cold or fear didn't really matter. This was the leader, who was considered one of the strongest in their tribe. With his mastery of third-level magic, only a minority could keep up with him. This had been true for the past 40 years, but on the morning of Adi, when the sun had still not risen, the lizardmen were going about their usual lives, hunting and other things. In short, it should have been a normal day like any other. Until a figure armored from head to toe in black armor came, terrifying the edges of their tribe. He didn't mention his goal or the reason he came. He just pulled a transparent blue sword out of nowhere. And then, bodies started falling. With every swing of his sword, dozens fell, whether warriors, women or children. Their limbs were brutally severed and then left to die slowly. The luckiest of them were those whose heads were quickly severed, allowing them to die quickly and painlessly. With every movement of his hand, tons of ice blocks formed, covering the entire place, trapping them there just to wait for their death. All the warriors tried to resist, even he himself intervened, but nothing changed. Everyone was killed easily. Before they could get close to him, they were frozen into ice statues or cut into hundreds of pieces. Even he himself used all the spells he had and exhausted all his magic in a desperate attempt to fight back, only to be met with harsh reality. His spells didn't even cause a scratch on the armor, and the invader didn't even try to fight back or dodge his attacks. He just ignored them as if they didn't exist. Then with one movement of his hand, most of the warriors and the entire area froze in a bitter cold that seeped into every cell in his body. This was the signal that set off alarm bells in his head. He took a step back, then a second, then a third, and slipped and fell on his butt on the cold ground, but he didn't care. All his focus was on the demon who was slaughtering his people in front of him. No, he was worse than the demon, and what was worse was that he couldn't do anything. Instead, he just sat there shivering. Then, using all the strength he had left to stand, he did what anyone else would have done in his place. Run. Run with all your might to save your miserable life far enough away that this demon wouldn't find you. But, where will he escape? The whole place is enclosed by ice walls surrounding the whole place. No matter how hard he tries to break them, they won't budge an inch. He panicked. There was no escape from this cold hell and he knew it very well. But he wasn't ready to accept his death so easily. Then, miraculously, with what remained of his dignity and courage, he decided to return and confront the intruder with the rest of the warriors. With this thought, he returned to where the fighting had been, even if this was his end. But when he arrived, all the courage and dignity he had left evaporated and he peed on himself with a look of horror on his face at the sight before him. What lay there was pools of blood, with the remains of the lizardmen floating in it, from their outer extremities like heads and limbs to their intestines and hearts, either cut into pieces or pierced with their organs flowing from within them. He couldn't control himself and started vomiting. When he finished, he took a hesitant look in front of him, only to be met with a stare that sent shivers down every inch of his body. Although he didn't see the other person's face, it caused him indescribable fear. With faltering steps, he stood up and ran desperately towards his tent. He trembles in hiding and prays that all the killing he has done will be enough, or that he will forget about him and never find him. Tap tap tap. But the only thing that answered his prayer was the sound of footsteps slowly advancing towards him. He raised his head, afraid of what was in front of him, hoping that he was imagining the voices because of his nervousness. As soon as he did, he saw a helmet in front of his head. Although it was somewhat open, all that appeared was pitch darkness, looking directly into his face. Ah! He jumped back in a futile attempt to escape and crashed into the tent wall. Knowing there was no escape, he knelt as fast as he could on the ground, so much so that his forehead bled, and then he began to beg for his life. Please forgive my life. I will do anything, so please. His words were filled with despair. Waiting for the other person's judgment that would determine his life or death. Then, after a few moments of silence, the man finally said something in a deep voice that increased the fear in the Sheikh's heart. Tell me, which do you think is better, fire or ice dragons? To say he was surprised by the question would be an understatement. In fact, he didn't even expect an answer from the other party. Now, with a question like that, how was he supposed to answer? He had never seen a dragon in his life. Ah, I guess it's a fire dragon. He answered, unsure of his own words, so he didn't know he was bringing himself to his end. Good choice. A smile formed on his face upon hearing that his answer was correct. But it's not what I wanted to hear. He didn't even have time to change his expression because the next moment he was staring at his headless body lying on the ground. In the end, he thought of one thing. Why did he do this to us? Then the leader died, thus announcing the extermination of the green lizard tribe. Velzard Pav. After killing the boss, I scattered my sword and stretched my body a little. This was boring, I didn't even use a single skill or technique on them. She kicked the leader's head, sending him flying out, then she went out herself, only to be met with the smell of blood. Why do I have to be so strong? She said after seeing all the bodies she couldn't bring herself to even care about defense. Anyway, I feel relieved that they got what they deserved. With that, she headed towards the provisions tent to complete her mission, and what she found was lots of flesh and human limbs laid out in order and tied with ropes. The smell in here was worse than outside, but Velzard was used to bad smells, so she didn't complain much. After burning her to ashes with the fireball, she continued searching for her target. What? How did she get the fireball? It's simple. When the boss launched his attacks at her, they were copied with her copy skill, and with that, her arsenal was boosted again, even if only by a little. And now these are her stati. Name: Velzard. Age: looks in 20s. Race: True Ice and Frost Dragon. HP: 130,600. EP: 101,010. MP: 99,230. Racial abilities: True Dragon Hockey, True Dragon Magic, Universal Sense Weakened ++, Infinite Regeneration, Creating and Manipulating Ice, Creation of Matter Weakened. Resistances and Neutralization: Physical Damage Neutralization, Magical Damage Neutralization, Holy Demonic Attack Resistance, Pain Neutralization, Abnormal Status Neutralization, Poison Neutralization, Thermal Effect Neutralization Weakened ++. Ultimate Skills: Patience King Gabriel, sealed. 0.8 of the seal was broken, skills creating, onlay s and less. Unique skills. Skills: Instant Healing, Copy, Rot. Magic: True Dragon Magic, Ice and Frost Magic plus, increased speed and power of magic, Fireball, Lightning, Electrosphere, Thunderball, Acid Arrow. Techniques: Frost Rain, hundreds of ice shards fall from the sky at high speed. Ice Age, fires a large amount of ice in all directions. Absolute Zero, drastically lowers the temperature. If I add a large amount of mana can reach 0 Kelvin. Plus, mana required to activate has been reduced. Frost Dragons, 3 ice dragons that attack and defend. Iceman, a formidable human-like creature made of ice whose size and hardness can be increased with mana. Plus, increased the strength and durability of snowmen. Equipment: Unique rank full armor, dress resistant to physical and magical attacks, indestructible, the Great Blessing Necklace, Sword of Destiny. Fireball. A large fireball is fired at the target and explodes with force to cause area damage. Lightning. Fires an electric shock from the finger, causing damage in one line. Electrosphere. A spell that deals electrical damage in the area, paralyzing enemies. Thunderball. Generates a high damage ball of lightning. Acid arrow. It is an acid arrow that causes corrosion with continuous damage. Dot. Dot. As she advanced further, she found a cage covered with a tattered piece of cloth. When she removed the cover, she found 5 people, 3 girls and 2 boys, all of whom appeared to be suffering from malnutrition, and their eyes were empty, indicating that they had lost hope of survival. They wore expensive clothes, although they were torn and dirty, indicating their status as nobles. After a few moments of staring at them quietly, one of the girls turned to look at her. As soon as she saw that Velzard wasn't a lizard, a little hope flashed in her eyes and she asked, "Hey, are you here to save us?" Her voice was dry from the lack of water, but it was clear enough to attract the attention of the others who looked at him with the same looks. "Yes, I'm here to save you, so let's leave this place." With immediate effect, the children straightened up with the greatest joy they could muster in their shabby state and began to cry with joy as they hugged each other. I will skip the return flight. Upon their arrival to the city, the guards received them, and after a few procedures, they entered the city and headed towards one of the palaces belonging to the nobles. Upon entering the palace, they were greeted by a man who appeared to be in his 40s, with gray hair and a small mustache, wearing a luxurious suit and looking worried. After Velzard got out of the carriage, he spoke to her with concern and anticipation. "Did you make it? Are they here?" With his words, Velzard just nodded and pointed towards the cart. Without delay, the man ran towards the cart and opened it to meet the children's faces that teared up at the sight of him. "Dad!" 2 of the 3 girls jumped on the man and hugged him, crying as their father comforted them while shedding tears as well. After half an hour, Velzard was with Milam, who was sleeping in the palace. Since she returned from the forest, she had not woken up yet. Then suddenly a servant knocked on the door and said in a polite voice, "Lord Veldora, my master wishes to speak with you." "I'm coming." Then with another look at Milam, Velzard left the room and followed the servant. Guest room in the palace. 2 people sat facing each other, and although tea was served to her, Velzard did not touch it, which make the nobleman known as Edward Galileo kind of nervous. "Excuse me, Mr. Veldora, did you not like your tea? If so, we can change it." "No, not that, I just don't take off my helmet for personal reasons." With this, Edward sighed inwardly with relief, although the subject of the helmet made him curious, so he didn't ask. "Have you prepared our agreement?" Hearing the question, Edward straightened up and said, "Yes, the preparations are already completed. All that remains is your signature and the land will be yours." "Good, it was a pleasure doing business with you." To understand what they are saying, we have to go back in time a little. 6 hours ago. After Velzard arrived in the city carrying the unconscious Milam, they were stopped by a knight in front of the hotel door. "Excuse me, are you the Mithril-class adventurer Veldora?" The knight asked, unsure. "Yes, I am. Do you need anything?" she said in a serious tone, which caused the knight to tense up, but he quickly regained his composure and then said, "I'm here on behalf of Viscount Galileo. He wants to meet you." I refuse, I'm busy right now." Velzard hesitated for a moment but refused after taking a look at the unconscious Milam in her hands. The knight was about to argue when he was interrupted by a voice behind him. "I understand you're busy but we're in a tight spot right now, so can you spare us a little time?" This was Edward who intervened. "I'll skip the definitions. Quote. We lost contact with my daughters and their squad in the swamps, and since that area has a powerful lizardmen tribe, the other squads didn't want to rescue them, so you're the only high-ranking one we have left." He drank some water to moisten his throat and then continued speaking. "We know you're not in a band, but you have a great reputation as an adventurer." Then he seemed to remember something. "And of course, the payment will be big. Unfortunately, most of my money is invested in real estate, so how about I give you a plot of land as payment?" Velzard had no reason to refuse. She had wanted to build her own house for a long time, and now that the opportunity had arrived, she wasn't going to miss it. "Okay, I agree, but can you take care of my daughter until then?" After hearing the confirmation, Edward smiled happily and agreed to take care of Milam. Current time. After Velzard signed the ownership rights, she took the sleeping Milam and headed towards the designated location. The land was in a remote location far from the city, so there was no concern for privacy. The land that Velzard now owned was rather small. It stretched for 3 kilometers in all directions, but it was sufficient. Even though it was an open plain, she decided to modify it a little. Using ice magic, she created a terrain of solid ice that could only be melted at her will. She then used the Ice Age technique to change the environment from clear to an eternal blizzard in the entire area. Then with a final idea, I created a huge ice palace with a dragon made of ice on top of it. Welcome to your new home. She addressed Milam, who was lying in her arms, then walked towards her new quarters. She wasn't aware of the chaos that revealing it would cause, but that was a story for another time.